Roland Crump was born on February 27, 1930. From a young age, he had a passion for art and drawing. He attended art school in Los Angeles, where he studied illustration and design. After graduating, he worked freelance, a path which eventually led him to his big break at Disney. Beginning at the age of 22, he was working as an in-betweener, and eventually an assistant animator, on such Disney classics as Peter Pan and 101 Dalmatians. Over time, he moved into WED Enterprises, more commonly known as Disney Imagineering. Quite possibly his most iconic and visible work was on the Small World ride. Known as Children of the World at the 1964 World's Fair, Roland worked on the Tower of the Four Winds, a large sculpture that existed at the entrance to the ride. Later, the ride was brought to Disneyland. Crump was responsible for the ride's facade and the large clock which entertains guests waiting to ride. He also contributed to the ride itself, working on everything from figures to lighting in the attraction. Throughout his career, perhaps no one was a bigger champion of Crump's work than Walt Disney himself. When Crump's unique style drew criticism from his colleagues, Walt was known to step in and say, "I like it the way it is." Crump worked on many attractions at Disney, Knott's Berry Farm, and beyond, which brings us to my story. I started my channel documenting the history of West Edmonton Mall back in 2016. As I was working my way through all the things I wanted to talk about, I remembered something called the Laser Maze, a prototype walkthrough video game. It operated in the world's largest mall for several years, starting in 1986. Imagine my surprise to learn that it was designed, in part, by Roland Crump himself. Not only that, but when I reached out to ask him about it in 2018, he was more than eager to talk to me about it. I remember him remarking that I had found the most obscure attraction that he had ever worked on, and in fact he hadn't thought about it in years. Our conversations didn't just center on the Laser Maze though. I had recently read his book, and I remember just being awestruck while we chatted. My excitement was soon tempered though, when after hanging up the phone, I learned that the app I used to record the conversation had failed. It didn't record anything. No worry, I thought, that's why I have a backup device. Well, I don't know how or why, but the digital recorder I used as the backup had its recording somehow messed up too. There were crackles and pops throughout the recording, and I can't explain why. Murphy's Law, I guess. So, having said that, I'd really love to share some of the conversation I had with Roland. Stuff that didn't make it into my Laser Maze video.
For the 1964 World's Fair, you worked on the Small World project, and you created the Tower of the Four Winds. You say in your book that you hated it when you saw it.
I built a model of the Tower of the Four Winds, and it was gorgeous. And Walt and I were on TV with the model, and there were tremendous heavy wind loads in New York. So the engineers really had to beef up the design. So what they did, they took those nice, delicate little rods and things that I had and made them really thick and ugly. So I had to drive Walt down, and it was out there, and Walt took one look at it, and turned to me and he said, "Well, Roland, what do you think?" And I said, "I think it's a piece of crap." He said, "It can't be a piece of crap because it's $200,000. So, he and I had kind of a nice relationship, and he realized that I was not aware of the engineering that it took to do it. Now he was really sweet about it. He said, "Well, someday you'll get a Tower of the Four Winds that makes you happy." I said, No, it's all right. If it costs $200,000, I've got to be happy. So after the World's Fair, during the World's Fair, I finally decided to like it. So
You did.
it really was fun to watch.
That's great. When you decided to like it, we never made it back to Disneyland. It wasn't brought back with the rest of the ride.
No, I did. All the vice presidents of Disney came to me, and they said, "Walt wants to bring the Tower of the Four Winds back to Disneyland." Well, we don't want to bring it back. So we want you to tell Walt. There was just a lot of reasons that these guys didn't want to bring it back. So we had a meeting. Walt turned to every one of the vice presidents and said, "Tell me why you don't want to bring it back." And then Walt already knew. He said to one of them, "Are you worried about some of the pillars might fall off?" And one of the guys said, No, it's okay, Walt, but it is a concern. So he went all through 6 of these guys, and every one of them said the identical same thing. "Oh, it's okay to bring it back, but yeah, we have a concern in that area." And of course he turned to me and I said, "Well, you know how I feel about it, Walt. I don't want to bring it back anyway." So Walt turned to mall said, okay, sit down, we'll bring it back. And let me tell you, everyone in that meeting jumped up and left out of the room. They were so thrilled that he did that. But not one of them came back to me afterwards and said, thank you, Roland, for doing that for us.
But Walt knew what was up. He knew it was their idea as well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. He knew. He always did. He always knew everybody, and he could read them inside out and backwards, so there's no problem. He knew I was set up.
That's a great story. So, looking back now, do you wish that the tower had come back to Disney, or are you still happy that it never made it back?
No, not really. To be honest with you, it was designed for the World's Fair, and that's what it should have been left as, with the World's Fair.
When's the last time you rode Small World? Do you get to the park often still?
When they incorporated some of the Disney characters.
Yeah.
People started to ask Rolly. People were calling and asking, what do you think? What do you think?
But when I saw the ride, once they had these other characters in it, I felt that they fit in beautifully. And so I know they had a Peter Pan in there, and they had an Alice and everything. And the way they designed it, people that designed those characters, I thought they did it very tastefully. So I thought it was very, very well done. Well, the public is so, they own all the rides at Disneyland because they love them so much. So when you start flying with them, the public gets upset, which I think is kind of interesting because they feel that they belong to them.
If someone rides Small World today, do you think it's very close to what they would have seen at the World's Fair, or would you say it's significantly different?
No, it was identical. And there's been a lot of things that have been added to it that made it better. What I wasn't happy with it was because when Mary designed the finale at the very end, she was in a hurry. And then as time went on, we realized it wasn't a good finale. And we all felt that way. We got a chance, we got it back in time. We worked on it and we brought it up, and I thought the finale then became much better, and I was much happier with it.
Is that with the final room with everyone in white and singing together?
Yeah. Did a better job in lighting once it came home. Dick Irvine, who was the fellow in charge, he hired this lighting expert from 20th Century Fox. That lighting expert used a lighting expert when it came to making film. And what he did was he overlit the ride, which was really kind of sad. So once we got to get a hold of it, then I said, do me a favor. I want you to take it and light the sun with red lights and just that, and then call me and I'll come take a look at it. And that's what was wrong was it wasn't theatrically lit. It was lit for motion pictures. And so luckily I got a hold of it and we redid it and lit it like a real show.
And it looks great today.
Let me tell you something. When we brought Small World back to Disneyland, and I used to go sit outside on a park bench and watch people come out of the ride. And I saw all these people laughing and smiling, and I used to actually cry watching people coming out and being so happy. It made me really feel good.
The Haunted Mansion, the other Imagineers at the time didn't think Walt would like what you were sketching for the ride.
I've been working on the mansion for over 3 years, and I always felt that they tried to make it too cartoony, and I always felt it should be scary. So I started developing, scary characters. We had a meeting with Walt, and they kind of hid my model and all my sketches and everything because they didn't want to have Walt talk to me about it because they just thought that Walt wouldn't like it. When the meeting came to an end, Walt said, well, was that it? Did you take everybody? He said, yes, sir, that's it. Walt said, what's the stuff over in the corner? We don't know. Why don't you ask him? So he and I went back and forth for 20 minutes about how are you going to do it? I don't know. So finally he said, oh, okay. He said, I'm going home now. So he got up and he left. The next morning, I came to work at 7 o'clock. Walt Disney is sitting in my chair at my desk. And the first thing he said to me was, you son of a bitch. I said, oh my God, all that stuff that you showed me yesterday, I couldn't get it out of my head. I couldn't get it. An ounce of sleep last night. I've been up all night long thinking about it. He says, I finally came to a solution. We're going to do a museum of the weird, and then you can design all the weirdest stuff you want in the world. And I said, oh, well, that's a pretty good idea. Well, so we both kind of giggled and laughed, and he called all the guys back in that were there the day before, and he took them through it as the Museum of the Weird. And when they got finished, he said, okay, now I'm going to go home and go to bed. And they all came out to me and they said, Rolly, we knew you had something.
They changed their tune pretty quickly, huh?
Yeah. Oh God, yes. Yeah, they were good yes men with Walt.
Yeah, you mentioned that in your book, how Walt, he could tell when people were being yes men.
Oh yeah, he knew. In fact, it just bothered me because I thought, why do you put up with these guys? But they were his team, and he loved them.
That's awesome. Unfortunately, as we know, Walt passed away midway through the Haunted Mansion. How did you get the news that the Museum of the Wierd was no longer happening?
No, when Walt passed away, they threw me out of the building. No, they gave me a job at Disneyland as supervising art director and did not include me as a team that built and designed the Haunted Mansion. They kept all the guys that worked on it, but no, they let me go to the park and made an art director for Disneyland out of it. So anyway, that was all right. I didn't mind.
How do you think the ride would exist today if Walt hadn't passed away during its development?
Walt and I working together on it, we would have come up with a much better Haunted Mansion.
And was it your idea for the seance room, the fortune teller room?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was, Gail and I worked together on that, redesigned it from what I had designed, but he kept a couple of my sketches in there, and I was thrilled that he kept a couple of my sketches, so that was good.
Raleigh was really a sweetheart of a guy, and I count myself pretty lucky to have had the chance to talk with him. When I was a kid, I went to Disneyland on a few occasions. At the time, I didn't know it was Crump who made the stylized small world facade or inspired the ghost horse and carriage outside of the Haunted Mansion. I took for granted the ambiance of the Enchanted Tiki Room and the Adventureland Bazaar. It was Roly Crump who helped bring these things to all of us, not to mention all of the things outside of the world of Disney. And although it's a sad day to hear of his passing, his creations have put smiles on a heck of a lot of faces, mine included. If I could say one last thing to Roly Crump, it would be thank you. Thanks for the Disney attractions, thanks for the laser maze, and thanks for taking the time to chat with a longtime fan. We'll miss you, pal.
If you're looking back on your career, is there anything you would have changed? Or anything you would have done differently?
No. You know what? And this is true. People would always ask me what was my favorite project, and I always said they were the same. They were all of them were. Because I fell in love with every project I worked on, and always stayed in love with it even after it was finished. Now, the whole working with Walt and Disney was a complete love for me. Always will be.